Welcome to another book chat with me, Ray. This is my second attempt. So the first video I made was a review of Drew Gummerson's Hotel Flamingo. If you've not seen it, go and watch it and go and read that book. It's amazing. And that just got me thinking, because I read that book really fast for me, really fast. Like, you know, I don't really very often finish a book in one day, and I would never, I don't think, like finish something in one sitting like some people manage to do. I'm not the world's fastest reader. I feel a bit intimidated by really big, bulky books. Yeah. I don't know why. I think just I like the idea of ticking something off my to-do list kind of thing. So, you know, although if I'm really into a book, I do enjoy it and I do want it to last kind of thing. But at the same time, as soon as I start anything, whether it's reading a book, writing a book, you know, any project, I just want to get it ticked off, basically. I'm not a very patient person at all. So yeah, my ideal length of a book, I'd say, would be something like about 200 or 250 pages long. And yeah, I do feel a bit intimidated if they're really long. What this video isn't, it's not like, I'm not talking here about hard books. So these books that were my sort of longest reads, in terms of took the longest amount of time for me to get through them, get them finished. It doesn't necessarily mean it was because they were a hard read. Some of them maybe were, but it's not necessarily about that. It's just the books that took me the longest time to read is what I'm going to talk about. Now, I'd be really interested, you know, drop in the comments what books have taken you the longest to read, and, you know, was it worth it as well when you got to the end? Yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking about. Yeah, I'm not necessarily a fan of like page turners or anything like that. I will stick with a book if I think it's, you know, kind of worth it. And so these are some books that, yeah, have taken me a long time to read, and for the most part, yeah, it was really, you know, really worthwhile as well. Right, so book one of my longest reads is this, The Ragged Trousered Philanthropist by Robert Trussell, or Robert Noonan, I think he was writing as. So I was trying to think what put me onto this book in the first place. I'm very political. As people that know me will know, I'm a proper lefty. Although I'm maybe not quite as involved in politics as I was a while ago, because it's not much fun hating on Labour. But so I think I must have seen Ricky Tomlinson talking about this book, because I think it's his favourite book, I think, of all time. Shout out to Ricky Tomlinson, great guy. Very funny, but also dig his politics as well. So yeah, I think I saw him like talking about it or recommending it or something like that. So this book is, yeah, it is you can see, you know, it's a bit of a monster. I did look at I tried to Google the word count on this, and it was saying various things. So the original version of it was around 250k. I think, and if you think like the going rate, if you don't know your word counts, right? So kind of the going rate is around about 70 to 80,000. Yeah, I write historical fiction, and I sort of aim for around the 80,000. That's what kind of publishers are sort of looking for. And that's going to get you about 250, 350 pages, I think, in terms of page count. So this is, in terms of the page count, is more than your typical average page count. So it's 587 pages, near enough 600 pages long. And, you know, it's pretty dense text as well. And this is another thing that I find a bit intimidating, is like, I prefer it if it's a bit more spaced out, and, you know, it's easier to read, isn't it, if the kind of bigger font or a bit spaced out kind of thing. When it's little font and it's really dense and really, you know, packed on the page, I find that quite difficult as well. So that's one reason why it took me so long, because I'm just not a dead fast reader and it is a big old book. But the main reason why it took me so long is because I read it when I was an English teacher. So I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for nearly 20 years, and I started out as an English teacher. And as anybody who knows about this, anybody who's been an English teacher or knows an English teacher, lives with an English teacher or anything like that, it's a hard job, and if you're doing it full time, it's very full on, and you don't. On a weekend, I would try to read, and then I would just be falling asleep all the time, so I'd be so tired. So my main reading would happen sort of in school holidays, basically. So that's one reason why it took that is the main reason why it took me so long. Yeah, it's just because of, you know, the situation of just not having the time that I would like to have to read. Is it a good book? Yes, I would absolutely would recommend it. It's a great book, especially if you agree that it's politics, if you're a socialist. It's a very important kind of, socialist text, I would say. It is fiction, but the guy, so Robert Tressel, Noonan, whichever name you want to use for him, he was from Hastings. He was a painter and decorator. It's about a troupe of painters and decorators, and them sort of their struggles with their employers and sort of their struggles within sort of finding work and being paid a decent wage in a sort of, increasingly capitalist kind of context. And yeah, so I looked up Robert Tressel. So he was a painter and decorator himself in this part of the world where the book is set. So it's set in a seaside town. It's based on Hastings, but he calls it Mugsborough, which I just think is a genius, place name for him to come up with this like fictional place called Mugsborough, because they are being, mugged off essentially in terms of the labour that they are providing and the pay that they are getting in return. So yeah, socialist, agenda. So it is. I would recommend it, especially if you share those politics. There's some humour in it, but there's a lot of just, kind of left-wing politics. It's a class struggle kind of text. So if you are of that left-wing persuasion, I would say it's quite an important text to check out. And I guess that would have been why Ricky Tomlinson was recommending it. So that was my first long read, The Ragged Trousered Philanthropist by Robert Tressel, and definitely worth the read. How long did it take? I at this point I wasn't keeping a reading journal or anything like that, but I would guess sort of months, definitely months, yeah, but it was worth it. Okay, number 2, I don't have a copy of this anymore. I know, isn't that terrible? I get rid of books. I have to, otherwise I just wouldn't be able to move. So I haven't got a copy of this to hand. I think I gave it to a charity shop or something like that. But it's American Tragedy by Theodore Dreiser. And this is a real American classic. And it's based on a true crime, which actually, I don't know if I realised this when I was actually reading it. I just obviously done a bit of research, obviously, for this video. I'm not sure that I was aware at the time that this was based on a true story. So the story is about a true crime that happened in 1906 in America, and it was the murder of a girl or a young woman called Grace Brown by Chester Gillette, the guy's name that killed her. And I think she was killed with a tennis racket. I think he hit her with a tennis racket and then pushed her in a lake or river or something. So the book is set, and this is one reason why I wanted to talk about this book, just so I could say this. It's set in the Adirondacks in New York, in upstate New York. Some of the action takes place on Big Moose Lake. The protagonist is based on this Chester Gillette guy who committed this murder, killed this young woman. But it's a sprawling, long, obviously, story of sort of his life, really, up until the point where, as a young man, he commits this murder. And it's a bit, again, it's kind of has, similar to Ragged Trousered Philanthropist, it has class and socioeconomic class as one of its key themes. So it's a young guy he's born into this very religious family. I think his dad is like a minister or something, and they live a very frugal sort of existence as kids, sort of thing, which perhaps one reason why I was drawn to it a little bit, because I come from quite a religious background myself. But this young guy, as he grows up, he wants a better life for himself. He wants better, so he's got ambitions, sort of things, very ambitious. So it's quite Shakespearean, I think, in that sense. And he ends up, he manages to, I think they've got like relatives and an uncle or something like that owns a factory. And I think it's like a collar making factory or something like that. And my memory's not brilliant for books that I read a long, long time ago. And so, yeah, he manages to get a sort of job there, and he starts to climb up the ranks. and he falls for this young woman who he is engaged to and is going to be married. So he's going to marry into this kind of more well-off kind of family. So he is, you know, but he has an affair, which is just a physical thing that he has with this young woman, and she ends up pregnant. And when she tells him, he knows that this will be the end of his, you know, aspirations to marry into this better family and whatever, because of the time it's set, and it's early 1900s. Obviously, I don't remember it being a really like he plans it over a long period of time or anything like that. It's more of a sort of, I think he reads something in the newspaper about a crime or something, and it gives him this idea. Yeah, and I think they go out on this lake with a camera. I seem to remember he hits her with the camera, I think, and then pushes her in the lake. And then, but obviously, because he hasn't planned it very well, he ends up quite quickly being, you know, found and you know, arrested for the murder and whatever. But it's the last part of it, the build up, you know, is all really, it's quite slow. It's quite mundane sort of thing. Very well written though, very well executed. He's a very much kind of, he's not a likable character at all, the main character. But I don't have a problem with that. I can read books with, you know, unlikable narrators. But yeah, the final section of it where he is thinking about, you know, committing this terrible crime and wrestling with himself sort of thing, and then the actual, you know, execution of it is incredibly well written and incredibly, you know, it's really gripping stuff sort of thing when it does get to that part, the kind of the crime part of the novel. I'll just read you a little bit to give you a sense of the poignancy of it at the end, actually. And then once more on the water again, about 500 feet from the shore, and while he fumbled aimlessly with the hard and heavy yet small camera that he now held, as the boat floated out nearer the centre, and then, at this point and time, looking fearfully about, for now, in spite of himself, the long evaded and yet commanding moment, and no voice or figure or sound on shore, no road or cabin or smoke, and the moment which he or something had planned for him, and which was now to decide his fate at hand, the moment of action, of crisis. All that he needed to do now was to turn swiftly and savagely to one side or the other, leap up upon the left whale or the right, and upset the boat, or failing that, rock it swiftly, and if Roberta protested too much, strike her with the camera in his hand, or one of the oars free at his right. It could be done, swiftly and simply, were he now of the mind and heart, or lack of it, with him swimming swiftly away thereafter to freedom, to success, of course, to Sondra and happiness, a new and greater and sweeter life than any he had ever known. So you get that sense of this has not been planned carefully. He's clearly not, you know, clearly he thinks this is kind of more fate than, you know, than himself. Kind of, it's not free will so much of, you know, this is just fate that this is happening. And fate is another kind of theme, you know, in there, as well as like social class and the class struggle and the aspirations and ambition. It's a good read. I'm very glad that I read it. If not for any other reason than just because it is quite an important text in terms of it's been quite influential. There's been, I think, 2 films made of it, of this story, as well as I think when they made a sort of dramatisation of the O.J. Simpson story, I think they called it An American Tragedy. I've seen magazines where they've used it as a cover line, An American Tragedy. You know, anything where it's sort of, you know, the American dream, aspirations that sort of go wrong, that kind of thing, will often, you know, have this as a kind of influence or a reference point sort of thing. So if for no other reason than that, I'm kind of glad that I read it. It is a good book, especially if you like things like Truman Capote's In Cold Blood and things like, if you like, you know, novelizations of, you know, true crimes, you probably would really enjoy this book. Yeah, it's a good book, and I would recommend it. The word count on this one, 350k. Why it took me so long? How long did it take me? Yeah, again, no, longer. This took me a year to read. This book took me a year to read, and I remember I really struggled with it. One way that I, you know, like to read is like when I'm traveling, you know, if I'm on trains, trams, buses. Sometimes I don't like reading on the bus because I get a bit motion sickness, but I do, when I'm travelling about, I will read. But this one I never did that because it was too much of a brick to carry around with me. So it's kind of just sat on my bedside table. And I only read it when I was at home, sort of thing. So I would always have another book on the go as well, something a bit lighter kind of thing, because it is very bleak. It's a very bleak book, this one. The word count, 350k. So it is, you know, it is a real brick. And it was this kind of physical thing of it being very dense, very small text, just physically difficult to read as well. And I was still teaching at that time. So, you know, it's kind of similar reasons really why it took so long, but it did take even longer. I think this one, it was really a slog, but I would say worth it. Okay, so the next one, again, sorry, I don't have a copy of this. Got rid of it at some point. Is Ulysses by James Joyce. Now, obviously, there's tons and tons of content been made about this. This is not, yeah, I mean, you know, you've got lots of audiobooks. So if you can't be bothered to read it, you can just listen to it. Great books explained in 15 minutes. I don't know how they're doing this in 15 minutes, but another audiobook there. Why you should read it. Stephen Fry on Ulysses. It's his favourite book, I think. Another audiobook. How to read it. Another audiobook. There's an arena documentary about it. TV documentary. A summary in 20 minutes. How I came to love this book, and you can too. On a lot of lists of, you know, the most difficult books of all time or whatever, it'll be on there. Some guy, why he owns 2 copies of it. Audiobook again. A bunch of shorts. I mean, how can you have shorts on this book? How can you make a short on Ulysses? But anyway, Salman Rushdie on Ulysses. Advice on how to read it. Yeah, I mean, there is just reams and reams of this stuff. Not me saying, you know, how great a book it is, or how you should read it, or why you should read it, or why you should not read it, or anything like that. It's just about my experience of reading it and how long it took me. So it did take me a long time for slightly different reasons with this. So I read this book when I was doing my MA, which I did between 2022 and 2024 is when I was doing my MA in creative writing. And I was really trying to challenge myself and, you know, come out of my comfort zone with what I was reading. We had extensive reading lists, and I would try to not only read the compulsory stuff on the compulsory reading list, I would also try and read round things as well. And this was, I think, just on an extended reading list, on a sort of recommended rather than it being compulsory. You know, we didn't actually study this or study extracts of it or anything like that. But I just felt like this was a personal, you know, challenge kind of thing to take on. In terms of word count, this is, I think, maybe the shortest one of the ones that I'm talking about, 165k. It was quite dense, the text, and quite small print, so there was still that kind of issue in terms of I found it quite difficult to read from that perspective. But also, in addition to that, it was the fact that I was juggling this with you know, reading the essential reading on the essential reading list, with writing as well, and then with fitting in a job on top of that as well, because I still, you know, I'm a teacher. I dropped a day by this point. I was teaching 4 days a week rather than 5, but anybody who's a teacher will know that 4 days really means 5, maybe even 6 sometimes. So yeah, for all of those reasons, it took me a while to read. I don't think it took me as long as some of the ones that I'm talking about on this video. Certainly months. It certainly took me months. Am I glad I read it? Absolutely, yeah. There is some beautiful language in there. This is one of the more people don't really talk about, I don't think, Ulysses being a moving book or being how beautiful some of the language is. It's very poetic, it's very beautiful in places. And this is one of those extracts. Far away in the west, the sun was setting, and the last glow of all too fleeting day lingered lovingly on the sea and strand, on the proud promontory of dear old Howth, guarding as ever the waters of the bay, on the weed-grown rocks along sandy Mount shore, and, last but not least, on the quiet church, whence there streamed forth at times upon the stillness of the voice of prayer, to her who is in her pure radiance a beacon ever to the storm-tossed heart of man, Mary, star of the sea. It's very funny in places. There were places where I did laugh out loud. I just love anything Irish. You will notice as I make more and more content, it will be unusual for me to make a video where I don't mention some Irish fiction in there. I don't know quite what it is about Irish culture with me, but I love Irish poetry, Irish fiction, Irish music, Irish films, and TV and stuff. I've got a little bit of an obsession with the Irish culture, yeah. So, and there is another Irish book coming up as well later on. So, difficult, challenging, yes. Did I understand it? Did I? Hell, I'm not going to pretend that I did. I'm not going to pretend to be some kind of expert on Ulysses. I'm absolutely not. I can't really remember very much about it at all. I remember there's 19 episodes, I think, that the book is kind of it's structured around. And I vaguely remember something to do with a golden ox or something, and quite enjoying that episode. I vaguely remember one of the episodes being set in some kind of like a newsroom where maybe Leopold or Stephen works or something, or that was one of them a journalist or something like that. And I do remember really enjoying the penultimate episode, which I think is called Ithaca or something like that, which is basically Leopold and Stephen, Leopold Bloom, Stephen Dedalus, the whole book is like obviously just set over a 24-hour period, sort of roaming through the streets of Dublin and then coming home at the end, and home to like Bloom's home. They've gone back to his house, the two of them, for cocoa, I believe, a nice early morning cocoa, and it's written in a really weird way where it's all written like a kind of Q&A. So I'll share this little bit with you so you can kind of get what I mean. But so this bit is where it's part of that it's like a Q&A kind of structure in the penultimate chapter. And this is one he's gone, what in water did Bloom, water lover, drawer of water, water carrier, returning to the range, admire? So, what did he like about water, essentially? And, there's only a bit of it here. This goes on, I think, at least twice as long as this. But I'll just read. I'm not going to read all of this because it's quite difficult to read as well. It's very scientific. It's universality. It's democratic equality and constancy to its nature in seeking its own level. Its vastness in the ocean of Mercator's projection. Its unplumbed profundity in the Sundom trench of the Pacific exceeding 8,000 fathoms, the restlessness of its waves and surface particles visiting in turn all points of its seaboard, the independence of its units, the variability of states of sea, its hydrostatic quiescence in calm, its hydrokinetic turgidity in neap and springtide, its subsidence after devastation, its sterility in the circumpolar ice caps, Arctic and Antarctic, its climatic and commercial signal. Yeah, and you get what I mean. You get what I mean. Enjoyed that bit. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Molly bit. I know a lot of modern audiences really like Molly's bit at the ending, but it's also quite controversial, obviously, because of the lack of punctuation and everything. But also, I love how inventive he is and some of the new words and language that he invented as well. So I love it for all of those reasons. But I wouldn't say it's one of my favourite. But I'd say if you're going to read some Joyce, read Dubliners, probably. As recommended, actually, I saw the other day, Cillian Murphy talking about. Right, number 4 is this. Look at it. I'm struggling to pick it up. It is a monster. So this is John Irvin's The Last Chairlift. I'm putting it down because it is too heavy. It is possibly the longest book I've ever read, I think. And it came out in 2023. It's 320k words. The page count, I'll give you a page count actually on this one. I can manage to pick it back up. Page wise, we're looking at 800 and near enough 900 pages long. Yeah, possibly one of the biggest books I've ever read, I think. It's a proper tome. I mean, he's not known for writing short little books, John Irvin. His books do tend to be quite chunky. They are chunky books that I'm not intimidated by, because I just, if you nailed me down and made me pick a writer who's my favourite writer, it would be John Irvin, hands down. I think he is the greatest writer alive today. I think he's written some of the best books I've ever read. You know, if you made me do my top 5 books of all time, he'd be on there, definitely. He'd have to have at least one place. Is this one of his best? Maybe not. But worth reading, definitely. Why did it take me so long to read? Okay, so here's a story for you. So this book was being talked about a long time before it came out. So for at least a year, I'd been reading stuff about John Irvin's next book, and it had a working title of, I think it was Darkness as a Bride, which I believe is a Shakespeare quote from, I think, Measure for Measure. And I'd read that it was going to be this ghost story that was going to be about this ski instructor and her son. And I was so excited about reading it. I just couldn't wait to get my hands on a copy. Because, like I say, he is my favourite author of all time, John Irvin. But what happened was, I think it might have been due to COVID why it got delayed. I think it was one of those COVID projects, I think. And so it came out, I think, 2023, at which point I was midway into my MA. I was going into my dissertation year. I had so many other books on my to read pile and whatever. So this book just sat at the bottom of my TBR pile for, I think, the best part of a year before I even started reading it. And then when I did start reading it, I was still teaching, obviously, so I still had, some limitations on my time in terms of how much time I had to read. And still, it was one of those, no way could I carry this around with me when I was like, I worked in Nottingham for 3 years, just over 3 years. And I read a lot of books just on the train, on my commute. Best thing about commuting, just get to do lots of reading. But I couldn't do that with this because it's just too big. So is it any good? Yeah, I would recommend reading anything by John Irvin. Would I put this at the top of your list if you've not read any John Irvin? No, absolutely not. It's not one of his best. I loved, the ghosts in there. There's numerous ghosts. There's one bit where the young man protagonist is in bed with his girlfriend, and the ghost of his grandpa comes and sits on the bed in a nappy. He's just naked other than a nappy. That's one of the best bits that I remember from it. It is a good book. It's a good read. I would say it's too long. I would say it would have benefited from, some editing. There is, in the middle of it, a screenplay of it. I think it's like a sort of heist story, I think, if I remember rightly, which I really struggled to get through that part of it. I'm just going to be honest. I don't particularly read. I think screenplays and plays are meant to be watched, not meant to be read. So that wasn't my favourite thing about it. But worth reading, yes. A good read, yes. Better than a lot of stuff out there, yes. But if you're gonna do John Irving, I will do videos on John Irving. Absolutely, I will do in the near future my top John Irving novels video. If you want to get started, start with A Prayer for Owen Meany. There you go. So that was my 4th long read. And book number 5 is this one, Troubles by J.G. Farrell, which is my second Irish book on this little list. Although I say it doesn't read like Irish literature, really, not like a lot of the Irish literature that I'd read before and that I was expecting. So the writer actually he was born in England. I think he might have been born in Liverpool, maybe. But he was born in England. He lived in Ireland for at least some of his life. I think he died in Ireland, actually. And he had Irish heritage. But it doesn't really read like, I wouldn't say like the voice is particularly Irish. It's got more of an English voice. It's early 1900s. No, it's not. Sorry, it's 1970 it was written. Sorry. And it very much has a sort of, it reads older than that. It's very much got a sort of post World War One kind of, vibe about it. It is about a guy who is shell-shocked. He's a shell-shocked English major. Sort of like a love letter to a lost island. That's how it reads to me, is like a love letter to sort of this pastoral, idyllic, island before sort of the Brits came and, ransacked it. And maybe even an idyllic version of Ireland that maybe never even existed. I'm not any authority on this, obviously. I'm not an authority. I'm not Irish. I don't have Irish heritage or anything like that. But that's how it read to me. I struggled at the beginning, right? And I'll tell you what, I think why I struggled at the beginning is because it so wasn't what I was expecting. So it starts off and it's this major, it's called Major Brendan Archer. And he arrives at this hotel, it's called the Hotel Majestic, which is a very kind of ironic name for this hotel because it is far from majestic. Maybe it was majestic in its heyday. But by the point that he gets there, arrives there, it by all means is not majestic. It's actually dilapidated and kind of pretty much in ruins. It's barely habitable. But it is being inhabited by a bunch of people that just seem to live there. And I'm not talking about the family that run it. I'm talking about, actual guests that just seem to live there. There's an awful lot of cats that are doing all kinds of damage in there, as well as the weather is doing lots of damage to it as well. So it is very much fallen into disrepair, and the family have no money to kind of repair it or anything, or bring it back to its former kind of glory. So this guy turns up because he is supposed to be marrying, I think she's called Angela, the daughter of the hotel owner. They're engaged. They have very much had a very short romance and written letters to each other while he's been away fighting in World War One. And then he comes back and they're supposed to get married. So he's arrived at this hotel expecting to marry this Angela person. And for about the first, I'd say, good 200 pages or something, or at least 100 pages, I was just getting really annoyed because I was like, what is going on? Why is he's just stuck? He's kind of just stuck. And you keep feeling like he's going to go because this wedding is clearly never going to happen. They keep missing each other. They keep making these kind of arrangements to meet up. They're both in the same hotel. There's no reason why they can't meet up, really. But they keep sort of missing each other. I think she gets ill at one point, so he can't see her and things like this. He doesn't really know how he feels about her. He isn't really as in love with her as he thought he was, certainly. You never really get her perspective on whether she's, bothered about him or not, sort of thing. But certainly he's, not really that interested in marrying her. He's much more interested in this other young woman who I can't remember what her name was now. And it really was annoying me because I was kind of, oh, come on, just, go. Just, why don't you just go? Clearly, this is not going to happen. And I was getting really frustrated. But then there was kind of a light bulb moment where I was like, maybe this is the point. He's stuck. And then I was like, yeah. So it turns out this, and I was so glad that I did read this. I was so glad I stuck to the end because actually the ending is amazing. It's got a brilliant ending, absolutely brilliant ending. It's very poignant. It really makes you think. It was one of those books that stayed with me for a good few days, few weeks afterwards, and I was Googling things and am I right about this? Am I right about that? It is an allegory of, what happened to Ireland under British rule. So yeah, absolutely worth the read. It's a great book. It's at the ending. It goes a bit weird at the end. There's a bit where I think there's somebody who they think they're accused him of being a poacher or something like that. He's not at all, and they shoot him. And then I think they do something dodgy with to get rid of the body. And then there's a bit where there's a scene at the end where a bunch of guys get buried up to their heads in the sand on the beach, and the water's coming. It's a really good read, but it's not doesn't necessarily read like, don't expect it to be. It doesn't have as much humour as I thought it was going to have. It does read it reads very old. You can read some old books and they read quite modern. It does feel quite, dated, I would say. It's quite a product of its time. Or feels older than its time, I would say, because like I say, it was written in 1970, but it's set sort of post World War One, and it does kind of feel like a product more of that time, I would say, than 1970 maybe. But it was worth reading, absolutely, and I would recommend it, absolutely. So in terms of these 5 that I've talked about, I would probably say my highest recs on that list would probably be this one, and probably American Tragedy, but they're all worth reading. Yeah. So let me know in the comments books that have taken you a long time, that have taken you time to read, and kind of why maybe as well, and was it worth it? And look out for my next vid, which might be either on my favourite. I might do my favourite Irish novels actually next, or yeah. So watch out for that. Like, subscribe, and all of that stuff. Thanks for watching. This has been Ray.